So Daniel was explaining what art is. First, let's start there.
So art used to be, historically art was about representing reality. Going back to cave drawings or hieroglyphics, they painted historical figures, but the painter was at liberty to change the way the person was presented. And oftentimes it was powerful people who were presented because they were the ones paying the artists. So the powerful people represented in the paintings were not necessarily represented as they lived, but they're represented in a more beautiful or more powerful way, according to the basically political interests of the people who were being painted and paying the painter to paint them. So in the 20th century, or maybe late 19th century, photography completely changed all of that. And we had the ability to represent reality. Before the days of Photoshop, we had the ability to represent reality not as the subject wanted to be presented, but as they actually were. So suddenly, photography replaced all of these painters who had been training all their lives to represent reality in a convincing way, even if they weren't actually representing reality. And all of a sudden, photography said, "You guys need to find something else to do with your life." So that led to all of these movements in the 20th century called the movements of abstraction. So you had Jackson Pollock and all of these, the people who basically took the visual field and said, what else can we do with this? What does visual art actually mean? So these series of pictures are by a guy named John Baldessari, some of his earlier works. And what he's doing is he's comparing photography with two different movements of abstraction. So here you have a photograph. Now these photographs were haphazardly taken in Santa Monica, California. The expectation when you typically look at a photograph, we just trust that we understand what is going on. Now the question is, when in the past when you had a painting, you could doubt whether or not the painting really represented reality. But with a photograph, you give up that doubt. You no longer challenge it because you just assume that the photograph is representing reality. I think Photoshop has changed that lately, but for the better part of however long photography has been around, for the most part, photography or photographs really did represent reality in an unadulterated way. So here you had a photographer who was not photographing anything in particular. He was literally just walking around Santa Monica, California with a camera and just taking pictures haphazardly. And what he did was, so just look at, maybe this is a bad example, but this is a better example where the picture's out of focus. It's like the back of some guy's head, you see his back, you see like a woman here in the corner, and the question is, what did he take a picture of? And oftentimes we as the viewer of a photograph just look at a photograph and say, I get it. The problem here is there's nothing here to get. The photographer had no intention when he took the photograph. There is nothing there. So the problem with photography is it paints a very complete picture, and we no longer, it doesn't give us the space to put our own judgment or create, right? As you were telling me that you never want to have the whole truth. You never want to believe someone all the way. You should always have room to doubt. So what he's done here is he said, I'm going to show you a very small photograph. And the question is, what's the point of this photograph? Now what he's done here is he's taken two elements of the photograph and made a minimalist abstraction of just a piece of the photograph. This is the outline of the back of the guy's head, and some little gestural abstraction or abstract expressionist piece over here that represents this little piece of color over here. And so what he's done is he said, given these two movements in the 20th century, the way painting has given way to both photography, the realism of photography, and the abstraction of all these different movements of abstraction, which one is greater? Which one is the greater one? And he's given the space that he's dedicated to each one of these. Abstraction in his mind is the greater one. It takes up most of the space. And what he's done is he's also given us the white space to create. In other words, photography is so data rich that we're often just overwhelmed. The question is, when you're flooded with data, the question is, what's the point? Now, if you say this is actually what's important, this is what I want you to see, and I want you to ignore the rest, so that gives you the space to create. That's what he's done here. He said that photography is small compared to the movements of abstraction, and when you abstract, you also give space to create. How's that?
Cool. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.